Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Joe Tyrrell and welcome back to the Runoff, the GP blog podcast. Max Verstappen is building a bit of momentum. Whenever he's seen the checkered flag, he's won the race, and he did the same at the inaugural Miami Grand Prix. It might not have been a classic, but it was a great win for the Dutchman, and we'll be breaking the whole race down in today's episode. Cam and Toby will be joining me as ever to talk you through all the action, and we'll also look ahead to the next race, the Spanish Grand Prix. This is the 2022 season, episode 6.
Michael No, Mike, that was so not right. Get in there, Lewis. George Russell, qualified Mr. Hamilton. You are the world champion.
Well, we've just come out of watching the Miami Grand Prix, and it wasn't a classic, but Max Verstappen was victorious. Joining me, as always, are Cameron and Toby. Lads, how are you?
I am very good, thank you, Joe. I'm a bit tired after live blogging that race, if I'm honest, so I'm kind of just glad that we're getting this done straight out the way. But apart from that, I'm all good, thank you.
And I'm good, thanks to Joe. Yeah, doing pretty well. Watched the race, and although it wasn't maybe the best race of the season, I think there were elements of it that were decent and shows that maybe Miami has a future that could be pretty exciting.
Well, Toby, you mentioned you were live blogging it. Sometimes the new races, they're not always classics, and the boring races aren't always the most fun, obviously, to live blog. But what did you make of it, Toby? It was a new track, an entirely new venue. It was an intriguing weekend, I'd say.
Yeah, I think the easy way to describe it is that it was interesting. The racing-wise, in my mind, it wasn't particularly great. But when you look at it as a spectacle, which is probably what a lot of people will view it as, you can take a lot of positives from it, and you can probably see why there is now a Grand Prix in Miami. My personal favourite part was watching Martin Brundle do the track walk at the start of the race, where he was just picking any and every celebrity, and he asked a question to DJ Khaled, and he just went on a random rant about some utter rubbish for like a minute, and then finished it by saying another one and walked off, which I found quite funny. But yeah, I think overall you can look at it in a positive way. After the safety car, it was quite a fun finish to the race. So I don't think many people come away with it saying that it needs to be cut.
Well, we certainly haven't seen the last of Miami Grand Prix. It's certainly here to stay, and I imagine it will be here for quite a while. A spectacle is what I'd call it. I'd completely agree with you, Toby. Cam, what did you make of it? It didn't have the action on the track, but certainly off it, it was unique.
Yeah, I think it did what we expected. It did what it says on the label. It brought in a huge amount of fans. It brought in all the celebrities you could ever want to view it, giving it all the publicity that it would have wanted. Probably the biggest sporting event of the whole weekend across the world, and certainly there were a lot of eyeballs on it. I'm not sure if the amount of eyeballs would have been particularly happy with what happened on track, because for a lot of it, it was pretty procession-like from Max Verstappen. But yeah, like Toby said, the safety car made things interesting, and I think had there been one a little early in the race, it might have made things a little even more better and sort of made things a bit spicier than it were. Maybe a couple more. I mean, we thought there were going to be a couple of red flags incidents, only really proved to be one, but it did make a difference. So it shows that moving forward, if there's a couple more incidents when drivers are a little bit more used to the track, so maybe take a bit more risk, might be a good race in the future.
Cam mentioned there it was probably the biggest sporting event of the weekend. Well, he clearly hasn't been watching Worcestershire versus Durham in the county championship. But personally, I thought the race was pretty dull until the last 10 laps. I think the safety car was probably 20 laps too late, Toby.
Yeah, probably. But I mean, it still added that kind of intensity at the end because of I think Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen were battling for 6 or 7 of those laps, and there were points where the Ferrari driver could have got an overtake, which added a bit of kind of, what's what I'm looking for, a bit of I've already said intensity, but like there was the challenges there which we wanted to see. And to be fair, after the safety car, there was obviously the safety car was caused by a collision between Pierre Gasly and Lando Norris, but then after there was the incident with Schumacher and Vettel, so there was still a bit of action, but it was the point where there was a DRS train with 4 or 5 drivers, and it just kind of stuck for like 9 or 10 laps, and that kind of just sums up how many people thought the race would go, which is a bit annoying, but I'd say although it was probably easy to predict, it still kind of threw up a few surprises, which played into the viewers' hands more so.
We'll go into more detail in a minute about the winners and losers of the Grand Prix and each driver a little more in focus. But it's fair to say it hasn't been the easiest weekend for Red Bull and Max Verstappen. But when it really counted, he showed his champion quality, and he's come home with a second consecutive victory.
Yeah, for sure. I think that Max is now looking potentially the favourite. I don't know if that's disservice to Charles Leclerc and what he's done so far this season, but he's looking strong. Red Bull look a little bit unbeatable at the moment. Their straight line speed is just a little bit ridiculous, really, compared to the rest of the grid and compared to the Ferrari even. And you saw Leclerc with DRS, it basically just neutralised Verstappen's pace rather than giving Leclerc a benefit, which is obviously not what DRS is meant to do. But I think Red Bull have just absolutely nailed it now. I think they've sorted their reliability issues out, and that was the only thing holding them back. And it's probably going to be a Verstappen second title in a row, to be honest. I think that he's nailed on now pretty much, because I think their car is just so quick in a straight line that if there's any track that has any straight, they're just going to power away.
I think on any other weekend, I think I'd say Cam's overreacting. But Toby, it looks as if, well, I don't know whether it's a case of Ferrari have regressed or Red Bull have progressed, because the Ferrari didn't look as comfortable, particularly during the race, even if they qualified on pole.
Yeah, I personally feel like it's more so leaning towards Red Bull progressing. There was points where it looked like the Ferrari was like on level terms with the Red Bull, but when I say points, I mean very, very minuscule parts of the race. Seeing the battle between Checo Perez and Carlos Sainz throughout the whole race, it looked as though Perez had the upper hand through probably 60 or 70% of it, which kind of just leans in favour of Red Bull progressing, like I mentioned. I don't think it's set in stone, though. I think it's too early to come out boldly and say that is what's happened. For all we know, at the Spanish Grand Prix, Red Bull could be slower, but it's probably a safe bet to say they won't be.
I think there are two massive Grand Prix coming up. Spain, obviously, Ferrari are going to want to hit back. But Monaco being Leclerc's home race, that is a huge chance for him to really make a statement, I think, more than anything, on his home turf and hit back at the Red Bulls. 2 consecutive races. And I think the Monaco one's the key one. And potentially, it could be one of those moments in the season where we look back and we say, yeah, that Monaco Grand Prix, not only was it a good victory, but it was a morale-boosting victory for Leclerc as well because of it being on his home patch.
I just can't. I don't know. Leclerc and Monaco, there's just something there. I just can't. Something's just happened. He just can't do anything when he's on his home turf. I don't know what it is. Obviously, last year, crash in qualifying when he put it on pole, didn't start the race. He had a Q1 exit there, if I'm correct. When Ferrari, and if I'm making that wrong, I'm not sure. But yeah, he's just never scored points in Monaco in Formula One. And I'd love to see him win there because I think it'd be great. And I think it would mean so much to him, but I don't want to jinx it, but I'd love to see him do it, but I'm not sure.
Well, only time will tell on the Monaco Grand Prix. That's a few weeks away yet, 3 weeks away. Spain's up first, but we'll talk about Spain later on. First up, we're going to talk about our winners and losers from the first ever Miami Grand Prix. Well, lads, there were plenty of winners and there were plenty of losers this weekend. One team that have been losers pretty much for most of this season have been Mercedes. But Toby, they are your winners this weekend.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and simple. With the 5th and 6th place finish for Mercedes, I think that is probably as good as their weekend could have gone, seeing as how much of their struggles they've had. George Russell moving up 7 places to 5th, and then Lewis Hamilton holding his 6th place. It's where they want to be at the moment, I think, so I don't think you can take that away from them in any bad way. So they are my winners for this week.
Yeah, I think fair play to Mercedes. They are the 3rd best team on the grid. They're getting everything they can out of their car. And fair play to George Russell as well, because he's had a great result there. Cam, I'll come back to you now. Who are your winners this week? Well, who's your first one?
Well, first of all, just touch on Mercedes quickly. I think I said last week or the week before on our last podcast that George Russell and Lewis Hamilton will finish 5th and 6th if nothing happens in terms of retirements, that kind of thing. And they did that again. So first of all, I just want to say props to them. Toby, that's a great shout. And I think you could have gone a lot more in on the George Russell hype, but thanks for not. And my first winner is Max Verstappen. Boring answer, but he's now made himself back pretty much level with Charles Leclerc. I think there was a deficit before. And then I think he didn't need to win this race such a long season, but winning it in such convincing style. There was times where Leclerc was just absolutely nowhere in comparison to him. I mean, Leclerc was running in P2, so it wasn't like he was doing badly, but he was sort of 7 seconds behind before the safety car, I think. Yeah, Verstappen, pretty much domination. Obviously qualified third, but took Sainz off the line and then never really looked back. And I think he's adapted to a little bit of a hard start to the season. And fair play to him because he looks right up for it.
Yeah, Max and Red Bull really do look unstoppable at the minute. So you'd be pretty brave to bet against them in Spain, even though I've sort of given Ferrari a little bit of hope. You'd be brave to bet against them. Cam, your other winner, a former Red Bull driver this time, who's in a nice patch at the minute.
Yeah, Alex Albon he wasn't gonna get. He was 10th place at the moment. Could potentially be.
As of recording, he is 10th, but he could go up to 9th.
With Fernando Alonso, that debacle that we are unsure of how it's been solved as of now. But points again for Albon. He got points. Of course, he was going to go on my winners. I think he was a 10th clear of Latifi in qualifying, and I thought Latifi had made somewhat of a recovery and was closing that gap up, and it was a promising sign for him. But there were times in this race before the safety car where Latifi was absolutely nowhere. They'd stopped the same number of times and Albon was so far clear. And I'm not sure if that's Latifi not making the most of the car or Albon getting so much out of it. And I'm choosing to say it's more Albon getting so much out of it, a bit like Russell did. And he's dragged the worst car on the grid to points again. So I think he deserves praise for that. And he's shown people why he should be an F1 and why you shouldn't take that 2020 Red Bull season as he's a bad driver.
Yeah, I feel a bit sorry for Alex Albon because in the 2 weeks between the last race, all I've seen about Alex Albon is that Williams are going to ditch him for Oscar Piastri and he's going and putting in decent results like that. So I do feel a bit sorry for him. But Toby, what do you make of his performance?
I don't think you could fault him, but I know I'm probably going to upset Cam a bit here.
Try me.
Retirees played into his place. I think if Lando didn't have the collision with Pierre Gasly, potentially Gasly and Norris would finish in the points or above Albon. But I don't want to sound like a proper spoil sport. So
pretty big if that, Toby.
I can agree, but that's what happens in the sport. Russell's benefited from this year, so.
Okay. To be fair, he probably benefited. Well, he definitely benefited from it today. So, but no, you can't take away how well he's performed so far this season, especially as it's his return. So props to Alex Albon, and I'll keep quiet now.
Well, congratulations, Alex Albon. If the rumours are anything to go by, you might not have an F1 seat next season, but you are one of this week's winners. So well done to you. People who weren't so lucky this week, Toby, Haas have had a great start to the year, but this weekend was a bit of a stinker.
Yeah, it looked like it was going well at the start of the race. K-Mag and both Mick Schumacher made a lot of overtakes, and at one point have both moved up 5 places or 4 places, I think, actually. But then it kind of just all went a bit south. Mick Schumacher's running in the points, and then Sebastian Vettel tried to make a move on him. He collided, basically ruined his whole race, and then Kevin Magnussen hit the other Aston Martin and had to actually retire. So it's just, overall, it's gone from a potential points finish for one of their drivers to absolutely nothing. So it's one of those weekends that they'll definitely want to forget as soon as possible.
Yep, Haas will be looking to put that in their rear view mirrors and go on to Spain, where they'll be hoping for a better result. I just want to quickly touch on Mick Schumacher, who he had that incident with Vettel today. So all of a sudden their relationship becomes a little bit awkward. But is he struggling a little bit? Is Kevin Magnussen showing him up a little bit?
I think so. I think it's not particularly great for Schumacher that K-Mag has come back in to Formula One and has basically become everyone's fan favourite, I think, because of how well he's come back and performed. But I don't think he's struggling. I think it just doesn't look good that Kevin Magnussen's come in and done so well, personally.
I think it shows how good Kevin Magnussen is and has been throughout his F1 career. Because I don't think Mick Schumacher's a bad driver at all. I think he's a good driver. I think last year was an adaptation year. He's shown throughout his junior career that it takes 1 year to adapt before then he goes on and thrives. Going up to F1, it's never going to be where he's had a normal year and then just goes and wins a title like he has in every other category pretty much. But I think it just shows that Magnussen's a very solid driver and has been underrated for pretty much all his career. So I think that Schumacher to be close to Magnussen, which I think he has been, he certainly was this weekend. I think he'll learn a lot as well. And I don't think it's a downer on Mick to say that Magnussen's been better this year, because I just think Magnussen's a very good driver. And I think that Mick will only get better, and he's still young. So I don't think there's any concerns about him in F1, because I think he's here to stay.
Yeah, I think Mick's got two great role models in Magnussen and hopefully still Sebastian Vettel after today's crash to learn from. Hopefully he can continue to build and grow, because he's clearly a very talented driver. But only time will tell with Mick, that's for sure. Cam, you've got a team as well. They've had a couple of good weeks, and now it's been a pretty poor week.
Yeah, McLaren. Daniel Ricciardo out in Q2. Lando Norris qualified 8th. And then obviously Lando had the crash with Gasly, which wasn't his fault, I don't think. Gasly just didn't see him. But also the strategy with Lando was a bit strange. They pitted him probably a lap too early, and then had a slowish stop, 3.6 stationary time, and then that basically just put him out right in the middle of traffic. He was coming out as Fernando Alonso was going past, and then 2 corners later, he's dropped 3 places because everyone else is on, warmed tyres, and he's on fresh, trying to get the temperature in them. And yeah, from then on, he was just stuck in, I think it was 16th place, and you're thinking, how has this happened? Because he was doing okay. I think he'd lost a couple of places, but he was doing fine and looking like he was going to get points, and then he's just had a poor stop, poor strategy, and a crash that's retired him, no points. And then obviously Daniel Ricciardo 13th, pretty average race from Daniel Ric. I don't think it was anything special. I don't think you probably didn't even see him on the TV coverage at all, which kind of tells you everything you need to know. And yeah, so no points from McLaren, which is pretty disappointing considering, Alfa Romeo, Alpine, Williams scored points, and, they're considering themselves maybe the top of the midfield, and those other teams are scoring points and they're not. So one to forget.
Yeah, weird times for McLaren, who have come off the back of highs in the last couple of races to the low of Miami. I want to quickly give a mention to a winner of mine this week. They weren't a driver, they're not a team, and they're not the fans either. It's former Manchester United players who were clearly given free passes to this weekend's race. I think I saw interviews with Peter Schmeichel and David Beckham. Obviously, David Beckham owns Inter Miami, but they've both had a pretty good weekend compared to their former team, and they've had the opportunity to say how bad United are, so at least they're having a decent time. But we will move on now to the upcoming Spanish Grand Prix. So lads, the Spanish Grand Prix is coming up in a fortnight's time. It precedes the Monaco Grand Prix. Last season, Lewis Hamilton was victorious. He beat out Max Verstappen coming from behind to secure a much needed win. And it was part of a really solid start for Lewis Hamilton last season, when Max Verstappen still looked like the quicker driver. But last year's race, I think, was a bit of an anomaly. I think I'm expecting it to go back to being a bit of a snooze fest, Toby.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how it's going to go, so I'm going to keep my answer even more short and sweet than my losers little segment, and I'm just going to say I don't really know what's going to happen. I've been told that it might be a bit boring, so that's what I'm going to go with.
How about you, Cam?
Eloquently put, mate. Yeah, well, we've seen Spain in the past, teams testing there. They've just got so much data around the circuit that there's not much surprise that can happen. Drivers know the circuit so well, so mistakes are few, and strategy is normally spot on because they know the circuit and what it does to the tyres. The only difference that may come is obviously the new tyres, new regulations might make things a little bit interesting, because teams, the data from before with the previous Pirelli tyres might not come into play this time around. So that could throw up a few strategy things. I think maybe the only thing that would make it a little bit more exciting than we have seen in the past is if a quicker car, I should say, qualifies, had a little bit of a poor qualifying session, and has to come through the field. But I remain hopeful. I mean, I go into every F1 race hoping that it's going to be a good one. So we'll see.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the testing at Barcelona ruins the race for me. Teams have so much data now that it's beyond ridiculous, and I know they have to have it so they can extract every minute bit of speed out of the car. But I just think they test there every year. In my opinion, testing should be done at a completely neutral circuit without a Grand Prix being raced there. That's my opinion, which is why I think the Spanish Grand Prix is almost nailed on to always be boring. It's a pretty boring track in general, but I think it's just going to be naff. Lads, I won't keep you hanging. It's pretty late because we're recording this directly after the Miami Grand Prix. So I'll come to you, Toby, first for your winner, your pole position, and your surprise package of the Spanish Grand Prix.
So winner, I'm going to go Max Verstappen.
Brave.
Pole position, I'm going to go Max Verstappen.
Even braver.
And my surprise of the race, I'm going to go Kevin Magnussen top 5 finish.
I mean, yeah, that's caught me off guard, actually. I wasn't expecting that. And Cameron, how about yourself?
Yeah, well, Toby's taking the obvious answer, so I don't
know. Kevin Magnussen for a top 5 finish has caught us off guard.
Yeah, that is true, but I don't want to go Max, so I'm just going to say that Perez is going to win his first race of the season. Leclerc will get pole, praying for some Hamilton-Rosberg-esque Leclerc-Verstappen incident on lap 1, and the surprise will therefore be the fact that Hamilton gets on the podium because Leclerc and Verstappen are going to crash.
Yeah, I think we're due a crash, but unfortunately I don't think it's going to come at Spain. I'm going to go with a Sergio Perez pole position, Max Verstappen W, and I'm going to go with Valtteri Bottas on the podium.
Ooh, nice.
I think Valtteri's been class lately. I don't think he's got enough. I actually don't think he's got enough of a mention on the podcast because he's outperforming both Mercedes, although he missed out to them today. He's been outperforming them.
I wouldn't say both.
He's decent. All right. He outqualified them both, Toby. Anyway.
I think Valtteri, he's been so good. We probably should have spoken about it.
I think he should have been a winner at some point.
He's just pretty much been like 5th, 6th, or 7th, just like every qualifying session, pretty much. I don't have the facts about that out, but that's
fair play, Valtteri. You've had your mention. Now prove me right. Lads, thank you very much for joining me. I know it's late.
I'm ready to go to bed.
Cheers for having us, mate.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Lads, have a very good few weeks, and I'll see you for the Spanish Grand Prix.
Michael, go on. No, Mike, that was so not right. Get in there, Lewis. George Russell, qualified Mr. Hamilton.